How's it going, y'all? I did a stream earlier today on coding after 30's channel, so I'm probably gonna do a short one today. This could just be like a question and answer stream, or just like a chill stream if people have questions. I wanted to kind of make it focus on Next.js. I'm not an expert at Next.js, but I'll try to answer if you have questions specific to it. I could, or who knows? See how it goes. Teach us how to work with Node.js and Socket.io HTML CSS. You have a more specific question than that? I mean, you just set up a socket server and you connect to it from the front end, you know? Is this the first stream? I'm not sure what that means. Can you show us how to handle an SST auth session in Next.js? I've never done that, actually. So, turns out this stream is not as useful as you think it might be. Do you still use TRPC? I'm sorry, do you still use T3 in TRPC? Lately, I've just been using server actions. I think TRPC was really good for like getting that end-to-end type safety, but you can pretty much achieve the same thing with server actions, and I think they're pretty cool. But I'm sure TRPC has its other smaller benefits. Like it already has Zod validation built in, which is nice. If you use server actions, you basically have to find a library that does the validations for you, which I think there's one out there. It's called like validated server actions or something. As far as T3, I'm using all the same technology. I'm not using Prisma as much anymore. I've been kind of moving off to use Drizzle, which has been fun. They're both still good ORMs in my opinion. I think Drizzle just allows you to kind of drop a lower level if you need to. Hey, can you explain what server actions are and why we should use them? Yeah, so I think I'm using some server actions in this project. My zoom. All right. So a server action is a piece of code, a function that you can call on your front end, which basically wraps some backend code and abstracts away that HTTP call. Okay, so like right here, I have a form, and it's calling an action when this form is submitted. So it calls on create item action. And typically what you have to do is you have to make a REST API endpoint, make it accept like a post request, and then send back some response. And then the front end would probably use Axios or something like that to, you know, collect the form inputs and submit those to your API endpoint. With the server action, you can kind of just use the default stuff that's built into the browser and have a form data object sent over to the action itself. So if I go ahead and look at where this is coming from, I got an action here, which takes in some form data. So this is basically all the form fields that you have, all the inputs that you have with specific names lined out. So for example, this one's named name, and this one is named quantity. So on that form data object itself, I'm able to get those values, and I can just use them to insert stuff into the database, validate some stuff, return some stuff as well. That's kind of the gist of server actions, but the main benefit is that you get end-to-end type safety, except for when you're using form actions. You still have to kind of like do weird stuff like this. But technically, if you wanted to, you could like have this be an on submit, and I could just call the server action directly. And then I can see right here, I get the type safety. So this is why I said like it kind of replaces TRPC, because you know what arguments the server action needs in order to call it. But there's other benefits like progressive enhancement, how this will work with JavaScript turned off and stuff like that. That was a quick overview. Don't know if that helps. Can you deploy Next.js app to AWS, which is using a private VPC? I haven't tried that before, but I'm assuming you probably could. So like you don't want anyone else accessing your Next.js application unless they're inside that VPC. The way I deploy Next.js apps to AWS is using SST. So I'd have to go and see if they have a way to kind of not use, I mean, can you have CloudFront be in a VPC? I thought CloudFront's some like global thing that you probably couldn't be in a VPC. Let me Google that. Can CloudFront live on a VPC. You can create a security group rule that allows inbound HTTP access from the CloudFront managed prefix list. Yeah, I don't really know, to be honest with you. Message retracted. One of the biggest challenges I faced 4 months ago, which is how to generate code coverage for Next.js with Cypress and Instable. Man, I should probably change my stream name. I can't answer any of these questions. Like, these are hard problems that I probably spend days trying to figure out how to work. Coverage with Cypress and Instable. I have not tried that before. I don't think I've even set up coverage at all with Cypress. What's up, Zerif? And what's up? Shout out to my Twitch. 2 people on Twitch watching me. Once every day, I need to make some calculations on the server for each user. I have an endpoint API on Next, but the calculation takes too long. What do? I mean, how long does it take? And why is it, what is too long? Like, why is too long an issue? Is it timing out because you're deploying your next app on like Vercel or something? If you have a long running process, typically the approach you want to take is you want to like create potentially a queue. Like what I would do is I use AWS SQS. I'd probably have an API endpoint send an event to a queue, and then you have some other process like a serverless Lambda that picks up events from that queue and processes it on it. And those will last, the max timeout for a Lambda is 15 minutes. So if it lasts longer than 15 minutes, that would also change my solution. You might just have to have like a dedicated VM or EC2 instance that just consumes from the queue, processes stuff, and then at some point you'd have to write some data to a database, and then you'd have to notify the user via WebSockets or server sent events, somehow polling that the process that you're doing is done. But I definitely need more information to even answer that question. Did you find a solution for Next.js cache problems? I don't feel like I truly understand. I mean, like, you can call router.refresh when you need to on the front end, and that'll kind of clear out the client side cache. Calling can't speak today. Calling revalidate path will also clear out the front end server client side cache, I believe. So if you ever see stuff that like doesn't refresh in the page, you probably need to be doing one of those approaches. And then also, you need to make sure your endpoints are dynamic. That's something that sometimes you run into. For example, if you have a page, and that page, you write the code as if it's a dynamic page, but you forget to actually mark it as dynamic, right? So up here, export const, I think it's like dynamic equals force dynamic. You have to add that line, or else when you build your next app and deploy it, it's going to treat this as a static page. So some of the stuff will try to like pull it in build time and like populate this page. Or approach that they recommend, which I don't know why I'm not doing, is you do no store. There's like a function called unstable no store. If you call this function, it basically marks that entire page as a dynamic. And then any of the fetch requests on that page will also no longer cache. And this is important when you're doing like database calls, because Next doesn't know how to hook into this. It doesn't know that this is a database call and that it's potentially fetching dynamic data. So you want to basically make sure that your route is marked as no store, so it doesn't try to like make this a static page. So I don't know if I found a solution. I just found workarounds and things that kind of work. How do you go about setting up a cookie from the server side and reading it in the client side and vice versa in Next? I mean, I think there's a cookies. So like import, I don't know what it's called. Is it cookies? From Next / headers. What am I guessing? I'll just go to the docs. There's a way to set cookies. Oh yeah, it is from Next headers. I just had it misspelled. All right, so yeah, I mean, for setting cookies, I think there's some caveats to this though. There's some places where you can't actually set the cookie value. because it's like immutable. Cookies set, deleting cookie. A method that takes in a cookie name, a value, and options and sets the outgoing cookie request. HTTP does not allow setting cookies in streaming starts, so you must use .set in server actions or route handlers. Yeah, so I'm in a route handler. I think you just have to set a cookie like this. And then when someone hits this page, I think, let me just clear that. Let's try this. I'm gonna go to my dashboard, and now I should have a cookie called name Lee. I'm gonna change it to Cody. Cookies can only be modified in server actions or route handlers. Okay, so you'd have to actually call this in a server action. So when you press a button or something, you can't just do it when the page is trying to load. So that's the caveat of those. It's like, if I delete that, let's just add a button somewhere. So like your pantry, okay. Add a button. We'll say on click. We're just gonna call some random server action. And I'm gonna say cookie set name Cody. And I'll just say like set cookie. Oh, yeah, server actions must be async functions. I'm glad their error messages are kind of descriptive, or else I'd probably waste like 10 minutes trying to figure out what's going on. All right, so we got a button here. Let's try it out. So if I go to application, go ahead and just ban this. And if I click set cookie, it doesn't work. Because of course it won't work. Why wouldn't that work? Only plain objects and a few built-ins can be passed to server actions classes. Am I returning something from here? Go to my chat. Should change my stream name to I don't know, Next.js. Let's learn together. I know you guys asked a bunch of questions already, but I'm going to be stuck on this problem now because I want to figure out what's going on. You guys think these streams are for you, but they're really for me. I force myself to learn new things. Only plain objects and a few built-ins can be passed to server actions. Classes are null. Prototypes are not supported. Oh, I think I need to... Wait, no. Yeah, that should work, right? This is a server function. I got a button here. You click it. It calls a server action. Like, what's wrong with this? Input cookie. You set inside API. Yeah, I mean, I think you can make an API endpoint, but the point is I don't want to use an API, right? I want to use server actions because that's better developer experience in my opinion. So, I mean, I'll try one approach. I'm going to go over here. Let's make a new action called like test action.ts. The use server at the top. We will abstract away this. Export async function. Test action. When you call this action, it should set the cookie and then return undefined. Over here, test action. Why did I name it capital case? All right, let's try this. I really don't know what's going on here. What am I doing wrong? This is literally in their docs. Import cookies from next headers. Input cookies from next headers. Async function create data. Sets a cookie. They don't even return anything. Client-side exception has occurred. Maybe this is just my app. Okay, I'll show you a little debugging trick. So sometimes you want to isolate where the issue could be. So let's just make a new page called like test. I'm going to grab all the code from the other page. Delete everything. Literally everything. Over here, remove that stuff because that's obviously not working like I thought it would. Okay, so let's go to test. Click the button. Bro. This is why I hate on Next.js so much. Like, why I threatened to switch to Remix, but then I come back to Next.js. Like, you follow the instructions, they don't work. On-click in the server side. And it's not Next.js's issue. It's my own stupidity, right? This needs to be a client component. But I like to blame Next for my own stupidity. Okay, I don't care. I'm just going to disable that rule. There we go. I think that might have done it. There it is. So, the learning, the thing we should learn from this is that the errors you get back, if I didn't have used client here, what was the error I was getting? Event handlers cannot be passed to client component props. That one makes sense. Okay, that one's obvious, right? I need to make a client component. But the issue I was doing, which was a dumb issue, was I was pretending like this was a submit, like an action property, and I was calling an action, which you can only put on a form, which causes the app to just crash, which plain objects in a few buildings can be passed to server action. I mean, maybe if you're really smart, you would have caught that error. What if I do this? Do I get the same issue? Okay. Yeah, it's my own stupidity. Man. Let's scroll up. That was kind of rough. What was the question I was trying to answer? It's something about like setting cookies. We finally figured out how to set cookies, and the key is if you have an on-click, you make sure you have a client component, and make sure you're not doing something dumb, like just passing a random function that's a server action to your on-click callback, or else you get an obtuse error that I hopefully don't forget next time I do this. Bro, there's too many questions. How many people are in my stream right now? 129? Sorry, I can't keep up with all these questions. At least I found a growth hack on YouTube. Just talk about Next.js. How do you... Dude, where was that question about cookies? Okay, I'm all the way up here. How many questions have come in since then? Oh gosh. I should just end the stream now. This is just too much. I can't do this right now. Well, I answered his question. That's how you set cookies. Let's move on. Do you know the best share types between front end and back end code? I mean, you could use like a monorepo, or you could just, if you're using TRPC, that would share the types, and you can like import them from the front end. If you have a REST API, you could use. If you have a Swagger JSON file, you can kind of run that through CodeGen to like make TypeScript types for your backend API. I think there's libraries that exist that like make this really easy. But maybe look into that. What's your favorite data visualization library? I like D3.js. I don't really know what I'm doing with it half the time, but I think it's pretty cool. Really performant. But if you just want like charts and graphs, I think I've used like charts.js in the past. I don't know if I have a favorite. I honestly just Google, and like the first one that pops up in the list, I just use. What's the best way to fix flash of unstyled content on the initial page load in React? I've seen this when I'm developing locally, but like when I deploy my app to an actual site, I don't see this like flash, from what I've noticed. I think it's a Tailwind thing, but I'm a beginner. I know Mern. Can you please tell? Is it used in industry level applications? What next should I learn? Yeah, I mean, I think people use Mongo. I don't know if it's as popular as all the tutorials that used to make Mongo tutorials make it out to be, but I think there's people who use MongoDB for their database. Obviously, React is still popular. Node, I mean, everyone uses Node. Next.js uses Node in the hood. Express, at work, we have a separate Express server, although I'd probably recommend using something that's more like not bare bones, like Nest.js, I think would be a better like framework to use for building out a REST API. If you use Express, you end up just like hacking all this stuff together. But you really want something that like automatically includes like Swagger definitions that generate from your code, maybe type definitions that generate from your code. I think Nest.js has a lot of those features, maybe. Someone recommends Trimmer for data visualization. Okay. How do you learn Next.js as an Angular dev? Yeah, you read the docs. As a beginner, do you recommend moving to Amplify for hosting? I'm trying to get entry-level full stack position. Depends on what you're hosting. If you're just hosting a little side project, I would probably pick Vercel. Vercel is going to give you the best experience for hosting a Next.js application. Amplify is the second easiest. And then if you want to like get into the weeds of stuff, I would use SST and deploy to AWS. They got a cool little like Next.js, I don't know if it's like a level 2 construct that basically takes your entire application, deploys it to Cloud Front and Lambda and stuff like that. Good resource to get started with Next.js. Read the docs. I'm even joking when I say read the docs. There's like, if you go to Next.js and go to like /learn, they have a great walkthrough that tells you how to learn Next.js. Definitely recommend. I read through this. I learned some new things. I definitely recommend you read it too if you want to learn Next.js. Other than that, I mean, go watch tutorials. Coding with his name Antoine. Let me Google it. Coding with Antonio. Sorry, not Antoine. My bad. I just gave a shout out to this guy today on Twitter. Like, if you go and watch his videos, he literally has 12-hour videos where he teaches you how to build full stack applications with Next 14, server actions, Prisma, and he builds like really well polished applications. If you have the stamina to go through a 12-hour tutorial, go check him out. All of his videos are free. I'm blown away with like his videos. He gets almost like 500,000 views on his videos. It's good stuff. I will go check him out. It's Code with Antonio. Definitely hard work. I've tried making a 6-hour tutorial and I decided to never do it again. It's just too much work. Do I have any experience with micro front ends? Kind of, but not really. I worked on a project a long time ago where every team had their own like deployable service and UIs, and then we had like this shared portal where all the links to the portals would actually redirect you to different like subdomains, and those subdomains were deployed separately by the actual team working on that project. I don't know if it's a micro front end though. It's more like a, I guess that would be considered a micro front end. I don't know. I would say kind of have some experience with it. How do you go about JS in React and TS in React? I understand. I think the hardest part about using TypeScript inside of React is knowing all the types that React provides you. One of the main ones that you'll see is when you're making custom components. If you have, for example, a div, I think under the hood, a main is kind of the same as a div. So if you wanted to pass in some props, this is the best thing to know how to do. It's HTML attributes, and then you pass in a generic of div HTML, or sorry, it's HTML div element. Okay, and so that means when you use this component on another page, it already has all of the same properties that you'd expect when you're messing with a div. If you were to change this to just export a button here, like if there was no main, you could change this to HTML button element. Okay, they have the same thing for like HTML input element. So depending on what the top level component is of the thing, I'm sorry, depending on what the top level element is of the component that you're returning, you just want to change this. This is really useful. And then you can extend it if you want to and have something custom passed in. You could just do like, I don't know, something special, the Boolean. Does that make sense? So now I could actually do like value is equal to props something special. But then I also have all the same properties of a button. So disabled, I guess. I don't know. Does that make sense? This is like, I would say this is like 90%, 80% of like using TypeScript with React. The rest are just like learning about using the dispatch type when you're like using useState. I think what else. How can we scale a Next.js website for 100 concurrent users and what the cost would look like? I wish I had 100 concurrent users. That would be great, but unfortunately, I don't work on a project that big. Even at work, my project is not that many concurrent users, so I can't answer that question. I would say deploy to Vercel. Hopefully, it would scale for you. Is Next.js app router, is it stable with TRPC? I think so. I think TRPC, yeah, I mean, I think it should be fine. I haven't really been paying attention to TRPC and T3 stack, but I do believe the T3 stack released an update that had TRPC hooked into the app router. So you can go check out the T3 Git repo and see if they have support for it. I'm guessing it's stable. As a noob, should I learn Next 13 or go straight to Next 14? There's literally no changes between 13 and 14. So start with 14. I'm doing Django and React, but I want to hop to Django and Next. Does that create any difference? Yeah, Next has a lot more things that you have to know about. It has a different file-based router, has caching built in, it has ways to export metadata from your API, from your routes. Yeah. How do you rate limit APIs in Next.js without third parties? I don't know. I mean, without third-party stuff, you have to have a way to, let me rephrase this. It depends on when you deploy Next.js. If you deploy to a VM, that means you have a single Next.js server running on a single server instance. So you can use shared memory potentially to keep track of what IPs or what users are hitting what endpoints, and you can rate limit that way. The moment you start having to scale, you have like a load balancer, you're going to have to externalize where you're storing that metadata. So that's when you either just want to use third party, like, for example, like a Redis server, a Redis database, I guess they call it. That's when you have to start storing that information somewhere else so you can actually keep track of those increments of how many times they hit your endpoints properly. Otherwise, you have a bunch of different servers all running in their own VMs, all with their own fresh memory state. And there's no way to like synchronize them unless you have some type of third party database or service. What state management library would you recommend for React? I would just use the primitives they give you. Use context, use state. And then I like, personally, if I need more complex state management, I reach for Jotai. It's just super easy to just like take a piece of state and like share it amongst components. Yeah. Would you rather have pine nuts for ears or peppers for eyebrows? I'm gonna say peppers for eyebrows. That sounds pretty cool. If you do any heavy math computations, what library do you use? Heavy math computations? I mean, I think Python is really big into like data science and math. I guess it depends on what you mean by, like, are you trying to get the most performant mathematic operations, and like maybe there's some C++ library that you could use. But if you're talking about inside the JavaScript ecosystem, I don't really know. I'm sure they have libraries that do like matrix operations and stuff like that. But then like they died probably down to a third lower level language like Python or C++ to kind of run that code. I'm trying to build the clone of Discord in Angular, which was already cloned / built using Next.js. Can't I do it? I mean, you could do anything if you put your mind to it. Is that what you're asking? I believe in you. I feel like I've seen you before. Krishna Reddy. I think you've been in my streams before. Welcome back if you have. React hook form does not work on app directory. It does. You just have to use the use client directive at the top of things, I believe. Again, just using the app directory doesn't mean you have to use React server components. You can literally put use client at the top of every single Next.js page, and it's going to work almost identical to how like a Vite app would work with a single page application in React. Other than the router would be your file-based router that Next provides. When you put use client, it just says like don't do server-side rendering on this. Treat it as like a client component, and you can use just normal hooks that you see in the React ecosystem. Welcome back, Coding After 30. Gosh, look at all these. You guys have a lot of questions, huh? Where was I? I wish there's a way to pin. Oh, you can pin. I don't know what that does, though. I'm gonna try to go through these like faster. Steps on create web scraper. I'm gonna skip that one. Is Next.js router stable with TRPC? I already read that one, didn't I? Looking for a job as React developer, should I avoid state management libraries? I would just use the primitives that React provides. Would you create a video for React mailing.js? Probably not. I don't really care. Hey, I enjoyed the coding interview questions video. Thank you. I'm glad those are useful. I need to do more of those. I think people really like those. Have you ever tried other software development areas like mobile apps or games? I've tried games. I never tried mobile apps before. I would kind of like to get into mobile apps, maybe trying to use React Native or something. But I just haven't had the time to dive into mobile. While Next.js is popular, I still see enterprise projects using React in that too, with JS docs for type checks. So Next.js is something we really need to learn, and the app directory stuff. No, I mean, I work on a project that doesn't use Next. At work, we use React with ES-Build to bundle it, and we use Express on the back end. So yeah, you're right. There's tons of companies that are already working with projects that aren't using Next. Now, does that mean you don't need to learn Next? No, I think there's a lot of good stuff that you will understand about server-side rendered applications and caching when you start using Next.js. I don't think it's a requirement, though. Honestly, look at the jobs in your area and figure out what you need to learn. We use Varnish for caching Next.js. I haven't used Varnish before, but cool. I think you should give Angular a try. It's amazing. I used to work with Angular. I worked with Angular 1. I guess they call it Angular JS. And then Angular 2 came out. I worked with that. I got up to Angular 4, and then I switched over to React. So I never had any issues with Angular. I thought Angular was actually a great way to like have a consistent way to build an application. And at the company I was with, we had a bunch of different sub teams, and we all had to build our own UIs. And so there's like a directive, a mandate given to us saying we all must use Angular. And it made it really easy when one developer needed to switch from one team to the next because you're getting into a project that does things the exact same way. Versus the React ecosystem, there's like 20 different state management libraries. So you'll get hired on one project, they'll be doing something completely different from another project. It's kind of a mess. So I will give that to Angular. I think the consistency is nice. Why is this so hard to build a SaaS app? I don't know. I mean, just building anything's hard. That's why we all give up after 2 weeks. I had asked how I can mock Next auth app in Cypress end-to-end test, and you suggested faking the cookies. However, that's not enough. I need to mock the session provider, but I don't know how. I mean, I do believe Cypress has a section that talks about mocking out Next auth. Hold on. Or is it? Yeah, I think. Have you gone through this tutorial here? Testing with Cypress? They tell you how to like install this stuff. And then use this. I looked at it. I didn't actually implement it. But if you haven't looked through this, I highly recommend seeing if it works for you. Did you share plugins? I don't really have that many plugins. Did you have a problem with a big amount of database calls in your architecture? No, like I said, I never worked on a project that has like tons and tons of users. Okay. I use DynamoDB at work. I do want to kind of talk about this though. I use DynamoDB at work, and there has been times where we get throttling issues where like you're trying to request too many queries from Dynamo and like your PKs are overlapping. You'll start getting tons of errors. So we just have like code to just retry it. And we also have the DynamoDB is on a on-demand scaling, so like it automatically scales up as you do a bunch of requests. Hey Cody, is there any patterns that are specific to Next 14 for receiving webhooks? I don't think so. Just make like an API endpoint that accepts a post request. That's how you do it with like Stripe. You make an API endpoint. Stripe is going to send you a webhook event. You process that event. Can you explain the flow of our authentication in Next.js, like setting tokens and cookies middleware? We tried to do that at the start of the stream. You basically just have a server action that you invoke and you just set a cookie as needed. And I think in your middleware, you could make a custom middleware function to grab the cookie and grab stuff from the cookie to authenticate their session. Technically, you could store a JWT in their token, or you could store a JWT token in their cookie and you can validate it in your middleware. That's kind of the approach I would probably take. That's my quick answer. I've come across AWS SNS for sending OTP to a phone number. Is there any cost optimization techniques for this? Costs $20 for 100 messages. Is there any alternatives? That's how much it actually costs? That doesn't seem right. 100 messages is 20 bucks? Dive into the cryptic AWS docs. Mobile push notification. Wait, SNS? Okay, hold on. I've come across AWS SNS for sending OTP to a phone number. I mean, they have AWS SMS. Is that the same thing? With AWS SNS, you can send... Oh, yeah, it's the same thing. Base price, carrier free. That's how much a message costs. You said 100 is 20 bucks? I'm getting back 50 cents for 100 messages. I don't know. I'm not an expert at this stuff. I would talk to an AWS rep. Is TypeScript still popular in the web dev world? Do most teams use TypeScript in their React front-end project? I think TypeScript is the de facto standard, or should be, when you're getting into web development. Now, does that mean that everyone's using TypeScript? I don't think so. But you see most of these libraries that you install have been slowly using TypeScript, other than that one overly hyped debate about that one guy who said he removed TypeScript from his library, but great content. Glad to see you post frequently on this platform. What is one piece of advice you would give someone in identifying compatibility issues with a particular programming? I don't even know what that question is asking, to be honest. But while I got you guys here, I made a video about this. Typehero.dev. Go ahead and check it out. It's a great way to learn TypeScript. I just like the community and Trash, so here's a shout out to him. Not sponsored or anything. I just like this app, okay? Merry Christmas, Trash. All right, let's go back to the questions. What is your preferred database to use in Next.js? I like using Postgres. I also like using PlanetScale, which is MySQL. So just SQL-based databases I enjoy the best. Do you recommend to start every project on Next.js? I mean, not a big project, but not too small. I personally start every project with Next.js because I think there's enough benefits using Next.js that I want on my projects, such as search engine optimization, such as sharing social media cards, that I would just default to Next.js. I even like the file-based routing. I think it makes coding much easier. Put inside. Okay, this is where I was like debugging a bunch of stuff. I guess you've not solved the cache problems. This was when I was struggling with cookies. I don't know if people use. Can you please tell me if? Yeah, I think MERN is still used in the industry. I would say, do not return anything. Shouldn't be inside a form. We're doing next year's concert. It's just a button clicks. Again, I don't know 100 concurrent users. You'd have to go and like calculate that yourself. Go to the pricing page of wherever you're deploying 100 concurrent users. Figure out what endpoints they're hitting. Figure out how much traffic that generates, how much bandwidth that, 100. There's a lot that goes into this question, right? You have 110,000. I'm sorry, not 100. 10,000 concurrent users. How much traffic is that? Is that 5 requests per second? Is that 50 requests per second on your Next.js application? On top of that, what's the average page size that your next app is going to return to the user? Take all that information, put it in a calculator, go to the Next.js pricing docs, type it in, see what that looks like. If you don't know how many requests per second you're getting, then like that's the first thing I'd try to solve is like you need analytics to know how much traffic you're actually getting. Does use client or use server work? The easiest way to set up a queuing system which creates separate queues for each user in one consumer with a round robin approach. I mean, I think most queues allow this, right? Like, at least what I've used with SQS, you read a message, and when you like read the message, I'm pretty sure AWS puts like a lock on that message so that other people can't read the same message. I do think AWS SQS has at least once delivery, so there is a chance that you'll get the same event twice, but it's like a low chance. I've messed with RabbitMQ as well and ActiveMQ. I believe all those queuing systems have a way to basically put a lock on the message so that other people can't read from it. So you just have a bunch of servers that just keep on polling from the queue and then read a message. And then I believe did you have a problem with big amounts of database calls in your architecture? I answered that one. Cookies are set on the server side and then used in the browser. Yes. When to use context. I personally just avoid I avoid use reducer unless you actually have like a need where you have multiple state things that need to update in unison, right? Like, let's say you have a page that has a status, and when that status is pending, you also need 2 other state properties that need to be a certain value. That's when use reducer is really useful because it kind of like lets you build out state machines. Use context is whenever you want to provide a way to either share state amongst all your lower components, or It's really good for dependency injection as well. So like if you want to set up your application and just like inject some other type of thing, you want to use that provider at a higher level and inject different things, and then use contexts for like sharing that thing amongst all your child components. But it's not an either or, right? You use them together potentially. Is it possible to implement pagination in server components? Yeah, you probably want to use query strings. So like in the URL, you want to put what page you're on, and in the React server component, you put how big your page size is. And then in the UI, when they click a button, like go to the next page, you really just redirect them to a new URL where it has page equal to 2 in the query string or page equal to 3 in the query string. And then your React server component will use that page number to fetch a subset of data from the database using some type of like starts at field or whatever, fetches a limit of like 20 rows and sends that back. So yeah, it's possible to implement it. How can we perform initial fetch for some data, no use effect? If it's a client component, you have to use effect, or you can use a React server component, do the initial fetch on the server side, pass that as props into whatever component that you want. But this question I feel like needs a little bit more information. Like, are you in a single page application? Is this Next.js? How to handle delayed React state issues? I do not know what that means. How to master the DevOps side of using Next.js? I don't know what that means. Because if you deploy in Vercel, like what DevOps side of things do you need to do, you know? Like they deploy it all for you. They scale it all for you. It's all managed, right? So I'm not sure what DevOps side of things you're talking about in that question. I apologize. I get confused when using Next.js and TypeScript together. It seems that Next.js have some special kind of types of their own. Perhaps it is called JSX types. Where can we learn all of this? I would start their docs. Hopefully their docs talk about that. But I feel like, what types are you talking about? Because like, for example, I made a component the other day, which took in some props from like, let me just show you. I did something like this. I was just trying to wrap an image component, and I am in a action right now. Let me get out of the action. I was trying to do this, right? But this needs a very specific type of props. So I just said image props. And there you go. You get the correctly passed in props that are typed to be passed into image. It's just complaining about I don't have an alt tag or anything like that. But that's the main thing I've seen from Next.js. I'm not sure what other types you're looking for from Next.js, but image props, probably the most useful. One thing that I find really annoying is that on a page itself, like you don't have type safety for like what the heck the parameters are. So for example, I think it's like params. I don't even, it's like I keep forgetting these, but like, you know what I'm talking about? Like there's the query string parameters. I don't remember how to get those. I always end up going to the docs. It'd be really nice if this gave you like some generics of like, you know, if this wasn't any, but it isn't any, so that kind of stinks. I don't think there's a way to even do this, is there? Yeah, I don't think you can do that either. That's my one gripe about Next.js and TypeScript is that the pages themselves, the route themselves, don't seem like they have good ways to add support to that. What is a top tip for SEO, with Next.js? Use React server components, learn about the metadata tag. Like there's ways to export custom metadata based on the URL that you're hitting, which is really useful. For example, I think you can set like a title, a description. You can set like robots.txt files if you want to. I'm gonna make MongoDB. I don't use MongoDB, so I can't answer that question. Should I go with React or Next.js? I don't use Laravel, so I don't know. I would use Next.js personally. Can you speak on setting up headers in CSP and Next.js? Okay. Headers. I believe headers. Is there some caveat about where you can set headers? Headers are read only. That's a good question. I don't think I've ever had to set a custom header before, but I feel like I remember reading some people complain about it, how it's super hard to set a header for some reason. Because when you try to just get the headers on your React server component, it's read only. So that's only reading the headers that come from the request. For setting a header, let's just see what happens if we do this. I don't know if there's a way to set headers. I think you have to do it in like middleware or some other place. Does anyone know? Let us know in the chat. What's up, Yudo62? That's a good question, though. I should probably know this, but I don't. How to handle errors in Next.js. Have you ever gotten to the point where you had to consider something more performant than Node.js? No, because usually horizontally scaling your services is like enough, from what I've seen. I think if you have tons and tons and tons of traffic, that's when you want to use something more performant, because if you can shave off half a second on every request or like 200 milliseconds on every request, that's a ton of cost savings for your company. But for most of the stuff that you've seen in applications where it's get data from the client, persist it to a database, then data back, like, do you really need a really performant language to do that? I don't think so. Interview question: how to measure SSR efficiency in Next.js? How to find memory leaks? I don't know. I haven't tried Fastify yet. Is there any optimized authentication solution with external backends with the Next.auth? I don't know. I don't think so. Next.auth is like the de facto standard that I've seen, especially since it hooks into like all the third-party like OAuth providers. I think, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else. I mean, other than using like a third-party service that does all this stuff for you. What do you think about blockchain development in Web3 for React? I haven't really messed with Web3 in a long time. I mean, I think it's a cool idea. I don't know. I'll probably regret that I'm not diving into Web3. And I bet you in like 5 years, I could be like a millionaire if I just like stuck with Web3. I just don't think the world cares too much about crypto other than our small little tech bubble and investors. How do you handle the issues about Next 14 caching due to the client-side cache? You have to call router.refresh, or you have to call revalidate path on your server actions. That's the only ways I can think of clearing out the client-side cache. I use Express with Next.js. I would say not unless you have a really strong need to have an external API. Like if you can just couple it together, I think that'll work good. Next 14 docs tutorial is awesome. Yes, I agree. Coding after 30. By the way, I just did a stream with Coding After 30, so go check out his channel. I will give you a link. Actually, let me see if the live is posted. It is. So if you want to watch me answer some questions from Coding After 30 about how I got into tech and stuff like that, be sure to go check out that link I just posted in the chat. Also, go subscribe to his channel. Really cool guy. I'll probably be doing more streams with him and working with him in the future. Depends what you want to do. How many more questions are there? Did it just load like a whole nother chunk of questions? I think it did. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to skip over some of these questions. I just want to get to the bottom. How to increase your overall problem-solving skills, solve more problems, do leak code, and build things. Do you think Next.js server components and server actions will be widely adopted over typical SPAs? I think it'll take some time. I think it'll take a lot of time. I think there are benefits to using like server-side rendering over SPAs. How to learn new things that you don't know anything about. I asked ChatGPT. It's the easiest way, and then I go read the docs, and then I'll go find YouTube tutorials and watch through people try to teach me those new things that I have no idea about. Are most people who work in tech world liberal or conservative? What do you think? Probably more liberal, but I think there's just a wide variety of people. Like backend already, Laravel. What the heck? Did he start speaking a different language as he was speaking English? Yeah, I'm gonna skip that one. What's your favorite color? I don't know if I have one. Maybe blue. Insta blue lights in the back. We'll go with that. I don't know about this middleware issue you're talking about. It seems very specific to your stack. Do you think server actions the next days are stable and mature enough to use in production? Yeah, I think it's fine. Can I create middlewares with Next.js too? So the weird thing about Next.js, which I don't know if I like, is that there's only one middleware function. So this is your entry point for whatever middleware you want to run, and then you have to write your own custom logic to check the path that you're hitting and then run your custom functions based on paths. So there is middleware, but you just have to kind of build your own like internal routing system for it. You can't just go and put like a middleware function in front of different routes individually. Is it beneficial to watch a 12-hour project while working on it, or is it more effective to learn quickly by working on my own project? I personally like work on my own projects. That's how I like to learn. Some people like watching other people build stuff, and that's how they learn. I would say find what works for you and do that. You should use the in-progress library to show a page loader indicator. This will prevent flash or freezing when moving from one page to another. Okay. Do you think a production app could be deployed with SST, or is it better? Yeah, I mean, I think you can have a production app running with SST. I think the only thing that doesn't work with SST from what I've read is streaming, which might be a pretty big deal breaker to you if you're using Next.js. I think what that means is like if you wrap stuff in suspense and you try to stream components in, it won't work. So really, you're losing that performance benefit. When I say it won't work, I think the page just sits there and waits for everything to finish, and then it'll send over your page, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of like React server components and streaming. And you can read SST docs, and they kind of walk you through why that's not working. It's like an experimental flag you have to turn on. It's because like AWS changed something and broke it once in the past, so now they're just like they have it under an experimental flag in case AWS decides to change their stuff and just break your app. What's the best way to implement? I don't use it Laravel. I don't know. Yeah, I just want to make it apparent. I use Next.js and React and Node. So if you ask questions about Laravel, I don't know at all. I've never touched PHP in so long. It's been like 10 years since I touched anything related to PHP. So I can't really help you answer those questions. How every page gets to underscore app in Next.js, just like how it works. Well, that's the pages router. Underscore app TSX. Why are you so zoomed in? Zoomed into what? My face? Zoomed into the chat? VS Code? %9% of the times you don't need an external state management library. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Could you just live off of you doing YouTube? Not right now, I could not. To kind of dive into that, in order to live off of YouTube, you got to do a lot of sponsored videos. And when you start doing a lot of sponsored videos, people start not liking your channel as much because they think you're just a sellout. But really, YouTube AdSense does not pay that much money. So the only way to make a profitable living off of doing YouTube is by hooking up with other companies and trying to promote their services. Or trying to market your own courses, which is what a lot of people do. But I think YouTube just becomes like a giant marketing platform, and that's kind of like what you end up having to do. I have a $20 course that a majority of people say it's too expensive for a $20 course. Like they're asking for like discounts and stuff. So obviously selling my own stuff is not going to be a very lucrative avenue either. React hook form works perfectly. I use it in prod app. Okay. Dude, one of the questions. Do you prefer React hooks? I like React hook form. That's what I use in my projects. Yes. Points you come across in Next. The biggest pain point I've come across in Next.js is the caching. I think they just went all in on caching, and caching, in my opinion, should be an opt-in feature. Right? You build a page, you track it, you watch it with analytics, you realize that the page is not that fast, so then you go and you opt into caching. The way Next.js says is, we're caching everything for you because we want your app to be fast. And some of the stuff you can't opt out of, like the client-side router cache, you can't opt out of that. That's my biggest gripe with it. Other than that, I mean, I like it. It's a good developer experience, in my opinion. What approach is more effective? Watching a long project tutorial on YouTube than replicating or building a project? I think building something entirely on your own would definitely give you the most bang for your buck because you're solving problems that someone's not telling you the solutions for. How does Next.js update the page without reloading with the server component? Does the whole RC on every request? Well, I think the client-side router, like when you first load a Next.js page, I do believe it kind of like turned into kind of a single page application at that point, where when you do like navigation to different routes, it actually just fetches the React server components that would have been loaded if you were to just like load that page fresh, and then it somehow figures out how to just like diff your page and shove those React server components into the currently displayed view. I don't know. I don't really know the internals of it. I'm not the type of dev who likes diving into the nitty-gritty details of everything. I would go watch Theo if you want questions like that answered. What's your favorite system design question? I have no idea. Although there's this cool channel I came across where they just basically interview experienced devs about system design questions. One of them was like, how do you build a what's that car rental service? It's like, you know, those big companies, they ask you like, how do you, if you were to design Uber, how would you do it or something? I think those are interesting, although I have no idea how Uber operates at scale. I work at a really large code base with .NET backend. There are talks to rewrite the app since it got so bloated. I'm thinking to propose Next. Can you give me a few tips for convincing my team? That one's hard. I mean, like, I think the idea of rewriting an app, like, is there a way you can just fix your app? Can you just spend time refactoring it, add tests, and refactor your current existing app? Like, rewriting an entire app seems like a giant waste of time because you're going to rewrite it with some new thing that you don't know all the edge cases, and you're just going to end up hacking together some other project that's going to be garbage that someone else is going to say they want to rewrite in the future. So I would say look at your current app and if there are ways to just improve it. Like if your ideas are writing the app, have you guys talked about a testing strategy? If you guys haven't even mentioned ways to test the new app you're about to write, then I would just not even rewrite anything because you don't have, like, You're going to want a lot of tests if you're going to write something from scratch. I don't know if that made sense, but should I organize API folders and serverless like Next.js app? I would not. This seems like a weird approach. I don't even know what that means. Like, why would you're going to have a controller's endpoint and a routes endpoint? Yeah, I would not do this, personally. Any kind of project that would impress you at this stage? What kind of Next.js React projects do you think you can help me stand out in today's job market? Any kind of projects would impress you at this stage? I think if you just worked on something that you feel like you're passionate about, like maybe you got a hobby, maybe you like knitting, okay? Make an app that really shows your love of that side hobby of knitting. So that you actually have something passionate about that you can talk about during the interview. But I mean, you should have authentication. You should have like some cool features in it. It should be more than just like 2 pages. You should just try to add as many pages and features to it as you can. Let me just go to the bottom. All right, this is what I'm gonna do. I don't know if the people who ask these questions are still in the stream. So I'm just gonna go to the bottom and just try to like start fresh. So re-ask your question if I didn't answer your question, because I can't get through all this stuff. What are your thoughts on StyleX? I haven't used it before. What are your thoughts on Modi? I don't know what that is. So I don't know. Bro, Dev, there's too many questions, and now they're just gonna flood again. I won't be able to keep up. By the way, go check out Dev Agarol. I don't know if I pronounced your name right. He is. See, here's the issue. I'm gonna give a shout out, and then I'm gonna be so far behind in the questions again. But I'm gonna give a shout out because he deserves a shout out. He is another YouTuber, and I think he's on Twitch as well. I just pasted a link to his YouTube channel. Go give him a follow. He's got some good architecture discussion videos. He knows what he's talking about, so go give him a follow. Okay, where was I? Speedrun. What are your thoughts on using Rust? I don't know. I don't use Rust. I'm sure it's fine though. What are the best architectures when fetching and consuming external APIs in Next.js? I don't know. I would just have a function that like at least abstracts away the fetch call and then call that from your React Server components to fetch data. Thoughts on best file structure for monorepo with 2 Next.js frontends in a shared components folder? You have 2 Next.js frontends? Why? Yeah, I don't really know. If it's a monorepo, I'd just have like 3 folders, I guess. You'd have a share folder. You'd have frontend 1, frontend 2. Do you use any monolithic backends for Node like Nest.js or Sails? I do not. I kind of wish we did. We used to use Express.js. How do you implement real-time things like Jira to show real-time updates in a document tracking system like WebSockets? Yeah, I'd probably use WebSockets. If you want real-time, you probably want WebSockets. Bro, I can't even speak. This is what happens when I try to go fast. I can't even speak. When I submit a form, the form... Oh, you're not even talking to me, are you? DeFi when? When I submit a form, the form parameters keep getting added to the URL. You have to do either a form e.prevent default if you're using like a client component, or use like a server action if you actually want those things to be passed to a server action. I get a 404 page when I deploy in Vercel. Can you help me fix this? No, I probably can't. That's not enough information to help you fix it. I would double check you actually have a page for that URL you're hitting. How to decide if a state management library and app, I'm thinking of going with Zustan, and any open opinions on that? Yeah, Zustan's fine. I like Jotai. Zustan's good as well. They're all the same, honestly. Just different ways to do the same thing. How would you approach creating an algorithm for post recommendations in social media application? I noticed there aren't really any videos about that. Yeah, I don't know. I would probably leverage machine learning somehow and like have an AI recommend which posts should be displayed. You probably have to keep track of what posts people have liked Also, what videos people have watched. If someone is scrolling, they stop for 5 seconds on a video, you want to track that so you know that, hey, there was some interest in that video. Keep a database of that, of interesting things that a user has done. Run that through machine learning, and then take new videos as they're published, output them or input them into the machine learning algorithm, and then like also input the user information, and then see on a scale of like 0 to 1, how useful would it be to show this to a user. I don't know. I'm not a machine learning expert, but that's kind of how I think I would do it. Love your patience and expertise in the area. Please also take breaths and hydrate. Yeah, I don't have water with me, but that's probably a good idea. Yeah, let's take a deep breath. All right. Is there any way not to have JSON data displayed with div with text data? I don't know what that means. How would you approach multi-tenancy in Next.js? I mean, multi-tenancy, is that just, do you just care about the database being multi-tenant? Like, does every client need to have their own completely isolated like rows and stuff? Or does the client need their own deployed Next.js application with their own separate database? I feel like there's a lot that can go into this question, maybe. How important is knowing Webpack configuration? I don't feel like you need to know Webpack anymore. Like, just use something that has it all set up for you, and like it would be so much easier. How to provide more info inside of cons user. Oh, this is a good question. I think I actually have. Do I have that set up? So someone's asking, how do I provide more information? So I'm using Next.auth. And first of all, you can extend like a global module and you can add stuff to it. For example, I'm saying take the user session and add ID to it. And also like add that. I don't know what this is called. This isn't a union. It's just like a concatenation of types. But add that to the default user. And then down here, when we're setting up the JWT, I do believe I just make sure that's returned. So this is like the next auth configs, and it knows how to like return the user ID. That makes sense. No, I use Express. I think I already answered that question. 8 out of 10. Clerk plus plant scale versus Supabase. I've used Supabase for auth. I've used Supabase with their like client side data storage. I'd probably pick Clerk and Planet Scale, honestly. And no, that's not just because Dev is watching my stream. It's because I think, like, I was trying to have users register with Supabase and emails were getting sent to my spam folder. I don't know if that's a good sign. I would hope that doesn't happen with Clerk. I highly doubt it does happen with that. Can you please upload more videos about React interview challenges? Yeah, I mean, the issue is I have to think about these things. I don't just have a list of challenges I like go off of. I just like think of them and then I code them. But yeah, I'll try to do more of those since you guys like them. Is production level Next React code is also looking like what you're doing in YouTube? Production level, in my opinion, is everything is covered with testing. You'd have end-to-end testing. Maybe you have unit testing. You spend more time like really looking at your code and refactoring it, make sure it's good. Make sure there's no magic numbers, no constants you could pull out. Like when I'm doing production level code, like for work, I slow down, and it's a lot different from YouTube because like I'm just trying to make content so you guys can like learn the bare minimum. But there's a lot that goes into production ready code, right? There's like, is this mobile friendly? When I'm working on a single page, you got to make sure it scales down. Is it light and dark mode compatible? You have to check that. Is it accessible? Can I tab through different components? Can I load up my screen reader? Can it read out content correctly? If someone is blind, could they use this application? That's what goes into like a production ready application. And then if you have even more requirements, like your app must work with JavaScript disabled, you'll go ahead and disable JavaScript to make sure that you can still increment things without JavaScript. Can you still create things without JavaScript, right? And then of course, you have all this covered with end-to-end testing with Cypress. So for me to make a YouTube video of production ready quality software, I mean, it would take me like 4 hours probably just to build a single page that looks like this. because there's like not even 4 hours. It'll probably take me like multiple days because there's so much that goes into it from my perspective. That's why. Oh yeah, form validation, right? If you don't enter the stuff in, you click add. Do you have form validation set up properly? In your backend code, is that set up properly to handle exceptions? If you try to write to the database and it fails, what do you show the user? Do you just show them some arbitrary error code, or do you show them an actual like user-friendly message saying, hey, something went wrong, try again? Do you just do some retries in the front end automatically for the user if it's a 429 error code? So that's kind of all the things that kind of go into it if you're building a production-ready page, I guess you could say. I'm working on clean code. Oh my gosh, look at all these comments. Did it really just... I'm working on my clean code arc video. Got some stuff to talk about. Yeah, send me that video link when you publish it. I want to read through it. I feel like I read through the clean architecture book twice already. I've been given specific training at my job about clean architecture and making stuff clean. But it's one of those things where like you keep learning about it, but then like the more you think about it, you're more like, is this just over engineering? Just the fight that I have in my head all the time about this stuff. What is VS Code? I'm using the theme called Bearded Theme. Hey, Coding and Flow. He's another YouTuber. I'm just going to give shout outs to everybody. You take the time to join my channel. I'm going to take the time to promote your channel. There you go. Go check out Coding and Flow, another YouTuber. He has more subscribers than me. He's also doing Next stuff. So if you're trying to learn about Next.js, check him out. Got some good content. Do you use Next on your job? I don't use Next on my job. I use React single page application. How I explain to my manager that his AI is dog. I mean, AI is not bad. I think AI is actually pretty good. How would you implement cookie auth in Next.js with a separate Express server? Cookie auth in Next. Yeah, that question it's too deep for me to answer. I got so many questions I gotta go through. All right, I'm gonna end the stream when I've been going live for an hour and 30 minutes. I'm getting tired. I'm losing my voice. I didn't bring water up here. Some of the questions confuse the heck out of you. Yeah, it's like, I mean, first of all, I don't know how to answer some of the questions. I feel like there's just so much more context that needs to go into the question. Some people are like, my app is throwing 404 error, help me. Okay, like, no one can help you at that point. That's too hard to answer. I have 3 GB model using PyTorch Flask back in the Next front, and I am unable to deploy it due to size issues on EC2 instance. I tried Beanstalk too. What do you suggest? They don't. I mean, they should have bigger models, right? I'm pretty sure they have models that go up to like 128 gigabytes of memory. The question is that do you want to use that? Lambda also, I think, has a 10 gigabyte memory limit, and they can also run Docker containers as serverless Lambdas. So you may look into that. Maybe you can Dockerize, containerize whatever you're doing, try to get it deployed to Lambda, give it 10 gigabytes for its max memory and see what happens. It also has a 15-minute timeout. So like that's the max timeout. So whatever you're trying to do with PyTorch, maybe you can do it on Lambda. Do you think beginners should avoid using delegated third-party services like PlanetScale auth services and implement our own instead? I think it's good to learn. There's nothing wrong with learning how like to decrypt a password and salt a password and stuff like that. How to send out, what's it called when you register and you get this email, like a confirmation email, like understanding how to do that. I think once you've implemented it once yourself, it's not something you care to do again, which is why I would probably reach out to an auth service. Especially if you're trying to build something and move fast. Like if I have to spend 4 to 8 hours implementing auth, and I could just like use one that exists, I'd probably just use it. Clark, you want to sponsor me? I am able to implement WebSockets using Socket.io only in Next.js without Express. Yeah, I don't think Depending on where you deploy Next.js, you might not be able to get WebSockets working. If you deploy it to a single VM, it might be okay. But if you deploy to Vercel or some type of serverless environment, you're not going to get WebSockets working. So I'd probably just use a third-party service. For example, AWS has a nice API Gateway v2, which you can set up WebSockets with. That's what we do at work. It just takes the complexity of WebSockets and just offloads it to a service that's not too expensive. Sometimes things work on local server and hosted. So yeah, when you develop locally, there's like a lot of things that are a little bit different from when you're running on production. One of the main things is environment variables. You can accidentally set them incorrectly. Dependencies and binaries. Let's say locally you're trying to do some type of image processing, but when you deploy to AWS Lambda, you might not have the necessary binaries on the running machine. Some ways you can circumvent that is by using Docker, and you can run containers that have the exact binaries locally that also would be running on production. There's different ways to kind of do this. SST has an approach of just like develop always on AWS. So like as you're coding, I believe they're just like updating and running code on Lambda or something. Or maybe they have the Lambda function invoke your code locally. I don't know. They have some interesting things set up. 3 reasons to use server components. Better SEO. That's all I got. Now there's like, you know, the time to first byte metric. I think that would be slower server components, but if you use streaming, that could help improve your time to first byte. Less trips to the backend. Imagine you have a user who has to go and load a UI. That has to first initialize the UI, and then the hook has to fire to go and make a request to an API. So basically, you've kind of delayed the data that you want when you could have just gotten that data at the same point of when they tried to load that page. So server components would probably load the page faster in that sense. I didn't really elegantly explain that, so I would probably ask ChatGPT why we would choose. No, I guess ChatGPT wouldn't even know, right? It's not trained on new data. Oh man, I'm running out of steam. All right, have you considered using other languages? Are you all in JavaScript? I played around with Go a little bit, but I'm just going to stick to JavaScript and TypeScript, honestly. When we wrap an auth provider component, root layout. So does all the children, even if they are server components, become client components? No. So like, as an example, I probably have this here. I have a server layout. It's server because it doesn't have a use client at the top, right? And then it's using providers, which are client components. Okay, so if I go here, this is a client component. But the child that's being passed into this, it's going to get rendered on the server and then basically passed into this nested area, right? So like if I were to go to a page, this page is still a server component. So it's kind of like rendering this stuff on the server, and then it takes the output of that, it just injects it into here. But it's still a server component, right? You can't use on-click listeners here. Does that answer your question? The answer is no. It won't become a client component. You have to mark it as a client component if you want it to be one. But if you have a client component that imports another component that isn't marked as a server or a client, then it will automatically become a client component from what I've seen. So like if I were to go over here and say use client, and then this thing imported some other component like this, and if other component wasn't marked as use client, I do believe it would still, you know what, I think you still have to mark it as use client. I don't know. Again, I don't dive into the nitty-gritty of this stuff. I just learn how to build stuff. Why did you change your channel name? Yeah, I mean, the word junkie isn't really that good of connotation, like, you know, druggies and junkies. So I changed it to, first of all, my name, WebDev Cody. I just feel like it's more positive than WebDev Junkie. Although I did like the name Web Dev Junkie, I won't lie about that. But then also it's just marketing for me myself, right? My name. I think that's better in terms of like a business strategy if I have my real name attached to it. Because before people didn't know who I was, right? They're like, oh yeah, the Web Dev Junkie guy. But now people know that my name is Cody, and like if I were to go to speak at a conference or do something, versus if you go like for example, who's another big streamer or a big YouTuber? Like Gary Simon, he does like design stuff. I think his name is Design. What is his channel's name? Or I'll just say Web Dev Simplified. Like you don't know what his name is until you like really pay attention to his name. I don't even remember his name. I just had a talk with him too. You know what I mean? So I just think having your name in your channel is just good. Good for branding. Yo, what's Web Dev Simplified's name? Kyle, there it is. Dude, I can't believe I just forgot that. He's the GOAT. He's the GOAT of all React and everything. Sorry, Kyle, if you watch this, no disrespect. It just completely blanked my mind. But you see what I mean? Like, if his name was Web Dev Kyle, I would know. I wouldn't forget his name. If Vercel does all things in my project like scaling, does it make sense to learn DevOps? I mean, yeah, I think learning DevOps would always be good, but I do think it's kind of a separate field in this industry. All right, I can't do these. I can't do it anymore. There's too many questions. I gotta drop. Let's see. Is there anything that's super cool that I want to talk about? Thank you for saying my content's good. I appreciate that. I think. Is coding hard? Yeah, it can be really hard sometimes. Frustrating sometimes. Let's not go for your health sitting here in a chair all day. There you go. 3 reasons to use server components. SSR, easier developer experience, and streaming. Next.js. Are you sending my question? I have a YouTube channel. I couldn't post a video for the past 1 year. How would I push myself to upload more videos? I don't know. I mean, you got to figure out what's stopping you from publishing videos. Are you don't feel like no one's going to watch your videos or something? Or you feel like people are going to call you out and call you an imposter? Or maybe you're just not interested in it. Maybe that's just not a passion of yours, is making content on YouTube. I would say find the root cause. If you really want to do it, I mean, you'll do it, right? Will AI kill the dev? I don't think yet, but I mean, it's getting pretty good. Soon it's getting pretty good. It can kind of create entire web pages just from an image reference, which is kind of scary in my opinion, but skip over these good questions because I'm out of energy. When do you feel like it's time to dedicate certain tasks to graphic designers and not front-end devs? Yeah, I mean, if you have the privilege to work with graphic designers, like, you probably want them to do their job because they're going to do a much better job than you will for building out UIs. But introducing a graphic designer to a team introduces like kind of this back and forth pipeline of like, I'm just going to hack something together until the designer gets back to me. And then like it takes them a couple days to get back to you, and then you have to go back and redesign everything they gave to you. You mess up and they're like, oh, you didn't use the right font, you didn't use the right sizes. So I think it does add a lot of friction into the team unless they're like working directly with you every day. But yeah, I mean, if you really can't design anything, I think you should probably like have a designer try to design some pages for you. Kyle has his name in every video. Yeah, but I don't watch his videos anymore. I used to. I've already forgotten his name. By the way, I think Kyle has a course that he put out. He did like a little interview about TypeScript with me. So if you guys want to go learn, see me in an interview on his course, go check him out. Or go check out his course. I don't know how much his course costs or anything, but AWS develop deployment with Next.js 14. Easiest way to implement auth with custom metadata? I have no idea. How would you store multiple landing page templates user can choose from? It depends. Are the components something that like are you doing like A/B testing or something? I would just put them in the app and then just have them like toggle based on a flag. But if they need to dynamically be generated, I don't know if that's even possible unless you use like the new. There's like this new feature in Next which they're using for V0 where you can actually stream in like components that have never even touched like the bundle directly in from your server actions. I forget what that's called, but I think that feature is going to be really cool. Or it's really cool to use. I don't know if it's out though. Dev would probably know. He's more up to date with this stuff. I haven't tried SST Dev. All right, I kind of made it to the very, very bottom. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this stream. I know what the name I stream for next time is going to be the same title because this brought in the most viewers I've ever seen on a stream. So if you guys enjoyed my content and me doing this type of stream, let me know. I'll probably try to do it again in the future. I got to find a better way to answer these questions because I can't keep up. But yeah, be sure to join my Discord if you guys want to find a place to hang out and talk to some other developers. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe on every single one of my videos. Go ahead and just go back all through 700 of them. Just go ahead, like them all, subscribe to them, leave comments on them. I'd appreciate it. If I missed your question, sorry. It's not easy going through all these, but yeah, have a good day. Happy coding.